Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today I've got a special guest, a fellow Aussie, and that is Campbell from Autodidactic. So he's got two amazing channels. The first one covers Tartaria and the old world, and the second one is a little bit of everything and everything weird and wonderful happening around the world. So welcome to the channel, Campbell.
Yeah, cheers, man. Thanks for having me.
You've got some awesome content. Today we're going to dive into some of the best of your Australia, Tartaria, old world, hidden history type stuff, and we'll just see where the conversation takes us. But you've been into this for a long time. I only just came across your channel about a year ago. But yeah, what started your journey of curiosity?
I'm what I call a lifer. When I was very young, I just sort of saw that there was something pretty wrong going on, and that just sort of that's yeah. I've been questioning my whole life. Started just with the system and how it just doesn't seem right, and all the laws and the tax and people working their lives away for nothing, and I always was into history. I just sort of had this inkling that there was a lot of answers in history, and it was around 2014, 15 that I found a channel called New Earth, and she was talking about Tartaria and mud floods and star forts, and that was the first time I came across it, and it blew my mind, especially the star forts. I was just like, what? How have we never been taught about this? And then you find they're everywhere.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, so that was my first video. I just found this star fort off the coast of Florida, Fort Jefferson, the largest brick building in the USA, just sitting in the middle of the ocean. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And, probably other people have never heard of it. So I just made a video, and it just kind of snowballed, really.
Awesome. Yeah, and there's plenty of
Mm.
those star forts in Australia, which we might get to as well. And once you've got eyes to see all this stuff, Australia's a pretty magical place in all the cities with these cathedrals and old world buildings and some of the hidden
Mm.
history that plenty of people have been exposing. It's just such an amazing time to be alive, I think, as this is growing in popularity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, that's why a lot of us are here, right? To see the change, to sort of change into the new frequency, the new world, whatever you want to call it. But Australia is a good one because our history's so short.
Mm,
And so they can't really explain, all the stories of trying to explain these buildings and who built them, where they can't, they're just all so silly
yeah.
because they've got to compact it into this, 200 plus years, where it's different in Europe, right? They've got their, couple of thousand years they can explain it in. But, you see these, cathedrals or whatever castles in Europe, and they're like, they were built, 1,500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And then you realize they're exactly the same as what we find in Australia.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So, how would you kind of summarize for people? Hopefully, there'll be a lot of people in our audience today that are familiar with a lot of this stuff. But if someone hasn't really heard of Tartaria, basically the idea that a lot of these buildings are far older than we're told, or there's some shift in the timeline, some sort of reset maybe of populating cities, and it's just not really possible to build these things that are so fantastic. And often the Wikipedia page will tell us it's built in a year or two, and it's like, well, they didn't even have industrial production of these sandstone bricks or ways to lift them or the glass to make the cathedrals. Like, none of it adds up. So is that, how do you summarize it for people?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've all heard about, I guess it was Graham Hancock who first came out with the idea of, advanced older civilizations, and Tartaria just brings it a lot closer. So basically, yeah, I'm looking at it that it's a recent advanced civilization, and it's based on the buildings and the star forts and how did they build it, with horse and cart and copper chisels. And like you said, especially in Australia, you look at these buildings that were built in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, and then you look at what was in Australia. Like, did we have glass manufacturing? Did we have iron manufacturing? Did we have all? Could we get all these products? And then did we have the population and the skilled, craftsmen to actually put it together? And it just doesn't make any sense, because Australia is massive, right? And it's very dry, but we get these stories that, within, sort of 20, 30 years of the first fleet landing, that they'd found, gold, and they'd found iron, and they'd found all these different, deposits, and somehow they'd built roads and manufacturing and warehousing and all this stuff, and all the skilled worksmen, and it just doesn't add up. It
Yeah.
doesn't add up at all. Like, the glass is a good one, because we didn't have proper glass manufacturing until the sort of 1890s, 1900s, but there's all these buildings with glass windows beforehand. And so Australia's a good one just because of our short history, right? It's
Yeah.
very easy to see through the stories. And like you said, all the stories are so dumb. It's always some architect, well, it's actually just some person who's not even an architect. They win a competition,
Yeah.
right? And they design this amazing building, and then they go on to build another 20 or 30 buildings in like 10 or 15 years. And it's just a silly story. It just
Yeah.
doesn't add up at all.
Well, if you want to share your screen and start showing some of those best photos, but yeah, as you say, a lot of the time, the other stuff that makes me laugh is there's always like a fire, and they say that they renovated, or there's the photos of scaffolding when it's already complete, and they say, oh, this is proof that it was built, and it's just there's never any plans or anything like that. But yeah, let's get into some of your best
It's
images.
all pretty crazy, isn't it? So what have we got here? So these are just these are all images from Australia. So what's this? The Adelaide Steamship Company. All these buildings were, well, we're told, were built in the 1800s. I mean, this one, just to start with, you can look at these windows that go straight into the ground.
Yeah.
So the first question is, why weren't they building these on level ground with proper foundations? Right, these are all half sunk, and this is what we call a mudflood building, right? And the way to see a mudflood building is basically windows down, stairs up, right? So this is a higher floor, and they've had to put in stairs to get up and make that the first floor. But clearly, this is all below ground, which doesn't make sense, And people will say, "Oh, that's just where they, stored beer or coal or something silly." But it just doesn't make sense. This is Melbourne. This is 1950, but you can just see the size of this building now. I'm pretty sure that's the exposition building.
Yeah.
But just look at it compared to, you can see over here, we've got like what's that, 3, 4, maybe 5-story building. And it just looks minute next to this. And there's a cathedral here again. So we get these oversized buildings as well, which is another interesting, what's this? Don't know. But it's an interesting part of it, like where there are bigger people around, because we have these oversized buildings, we have these massive doors everywhere, and we've also got photos of giants. But this is a classic, right? Look at this, all built out, Roman style built, or what we're told is, Greco-Roman, all built out, but they haven't even done the road.
Yeah.
There's no road here, right? These horses are going through the mud, and you can even see here, these are tram lines, again, just in the mud, right? So it looks like all of this stuff was here, and it's just been uncovered, which again is, what we would say is the mud flood. Everything's been covered up at some point by some kind of inundation that happened, whenever that was. I sort of put it at probably, 250, 300 years ago, just from what we see. The main reason I say that is if you look at pictures from the 1700s, it's all this very ornate, very well crafted, imaginative clothes and everything, right? Their furniture, their carriages, all this. It's just very vibrant and creative. And then you hit the 1850s, which is when the photos first came in, and everyone's in black.
Yeah.
Like they're all dressed the same. There's no creativity left. And now we end up in the world today where they literally call modern architecture, these square glass cement building, is called brutalism.
Yeah.
Because it's brutal, right, to look at. And this is, of course, what we're told, right? This is what they'll show you is, this is early Australia, people living in bark huts.
Yeah.
And this is literally pieces of bark for their roof, right? And this is called wattle and daub, this wall, which is basically just raw tree branches and mud packed in, right? So that's the story we're given. But then we have things like this at the same time, right? These massive buildings with the domes, all these spires coming up, which I would call antiquitech. Basically, they were gathering energy from the ether and drawing it down into resonators and using that as an energy source, right? And of course, today we have to pay for all our energy. Here you go. Here's some power lines that they've put in, right? But these power lines are clearly nothing to do with these buildings. And this is our Flinders Street station in Melbourne. You can see we've got the trams there. But these things are everywhere. And here's a classic, right? Look at this building. Like, it's this amazing, big building. This is a horse, right? Look at the size of the doors. But a horse and cart on a dirt road. But they managed to build this. Oh, they've even got a statue of a horse up there. So this is, how I first got into it, is it just doesn't make sense. We can't build these buildings today, buildings like this, but we're told that, 150, 200 years ago, they were whacking them up with horse and cart.
Yeah, as you say, how do you mine that stuff with horse and cart and mud roads, then transport it, and then it's just also symmetrical, and the geometry, mass produce all those archways and those pillars, and then how do you crane them and lift them up? Just none of it makes sense.
No. I mean, you look into it and you don't find a storage, I guess, warehousing system. The first thing you would do if you wanted to build buildings like this is you'd need proper roads and then warehouses to store all the stuff in.
Oh wow, that's Launceston in Tasmania. That's where hometown where I grew up. I recognise that church is still here. Yeah,
1860s, and like you said, it's the symmetry. Like if you look at these windows, right, it's all in perfect symmetry, right? All these archways, it's all just done so well. And then look at the size of the people. This is the first floor goes up to here, right? So that's like what, 4 or 5 people tall. So if you're in a brand new country like Australia and you're trying to set up infrastructure and get it all sorted out, why would you build oversized buildings? Why would you use 4 or 5 times the amount of materials that you actually need? When the story is that they don't even know where these materials are. It just doesn't make sense. You think that they'd be putting their efforts into farms, right, into warehouses, into housing to get the country on its feet. But no, they're whacking up stuff like this, and it's everywhere, right? It's every city. There's an old map of Australia. This is the first post office in Melbourne. This is 1880, and it's the same thing, right? No non-sealed roads and horse and carts and massively oversized buildings. They just don't make any sense at all. And we've got the spire up here, right?
And probably the other thing we haven't touched on too much is the population. Like if you go to these small towns like, say, Launceston, where it's just shown, the labour you would need to build those cathedrals and churches is thousands of people. If it's, what they tell us that they were built in a couple of years is true. But the populations, and the resources, they just weren't there at that time.
No, yeah, or the skilled labour. The story in Australia is that it was all built by convicts.
Yeah.
So unskilled labor, people being forced to, they weren't getting paid for it. They were forced to do it, but they still managed to do everything perfectly. The best buildings we've ever built, right, by unskilled slaves, basically.
Yeah.
And this is Melbourne. This says 1850. So this is one of the earliest photos of Melbourne. But you can see we've got a 1-story house here. And this is a 2-story building. And look at the size of it. It's very Greco-Romano, which, again, all this, the way they're built, it's not what you would do if you were trying to get an identity for a new nation, right? You wouldn't go and put in, what we think are Greek buildings. You'd think that they'd be building their own identification. That's New Holland. That's just an old picture of, again, right, this story that they turn up and there was nothing here at all. A couple of little bark huts over here. But when you look at the actual photos, you see stuff like this. All right, so this is 1860, already completed. And the same style, right? All of them have columns. They all have these arched windows with the keystones in them. They all have the symmetry. Like they've all got these common, features to these buildings. I mean, even you can see this isn't even flat. You can see this window here is a lot smaller than this window here. So this isn't even built flat. And, when they build a 3-bedroom house today, they do it on a flat foundation. But they can whack buildings up like this and not have a flat foundation. It just doesn't make sense, right? If you've got, if you can think at all, really, like they give us a story, and a lot of people just believe it because, the experts tell us that it's true. But when you look into it, it just doesn't make any cognitive sense at all.
Yeah.
So I've got some more things, but look, these photos are everywhere. This is Adelaide, 1890. Another feature that we see everywhere is these domes. This up the top, this is called like a belfry, which is an interesting word, right?
Yeah.
Free of bells, maybe, because they took all the bells out. The porthole windows, which again are an interesting one. In this, you can see it looks like it's blocked up with some shutters, but I've got photos where these are empty, like they're just empty spaces. So that could have also been some part of a energy system. But that looks like they've all been replaced, and they put clocks in all of these. That's why we have clock towers everywhere, because of course, when you want people working the 9 to 5 for their whole life, they need clocks, right? They need to be told when to go to work. And again, the size of this building, we've got people here, and the first floor is like 3 times as tall as them. It doesn't make sense. And dirt roads.
Yeah.
Right. So like the whole story just starts to fall apart very quickly when you look at what was actually here. But when you go to school, they'll teach you about the Eureka Stockade and Ned Kelly and all these people, the swagman, and they're all just living in bark huts and that. But this is the actuality of what actually was going on.
Yeah.
Like they moved into.
We'll get into the bells and those towers a little bit more, I'm sure, later on.
Oh, don't know what happened there. I've lost my picture. I'll get some more up. But yeah, it's just a crazy story when you actually start to look into it for yourself. This is the main thing, that the stories just don't add up. They just don't add up.
The bells we might touch on while you're bringing up those photos, but for those that haven't been down that rabbit hole, all those old bells all across Europe, there's so many photos of them being destroyed and taken down for the war to be used as bullets and stuff, which is interesting of itself, maybe turning something that was used for good into something that was used for bad. But
Totally.
The sound and the resonance, and more people are sort of learning now about sound healing and vibration and frequency and the importance of all that. But some of those bells in those old photos are enormous as well, like meters and meters high, again, weighing tons. How on earth did they get those up to the top of these towers and that sort of thing?
Yeah, and like you said, there's so many photos like this where they've taken them out, and they also tell us that these bells, there's a big one for you, were made of a bronze that we can't make anymore, right? A certain type of alloy, and they're like, oh, we can't reproduce them, but they just wanted to. This again, most of this happened in World War II. The taking out of the bells, and like you said, they melted them down for bullets and bullet casings, apparently, which again is turning something healing into something that kills you, which is what they love to do, right? They love to just change everything. But I mean, the bells were just everywhere.
Just look at the patterns on those. Like, how did they cast those? Just beautiful to look at, and the sounds and that. But I think when you say going from something that was good and healing to something that's evil, that really ties into everything that's playing out right now, and people waking up to the fact that we've been taken over by this kind of evil cult that seems to run the world, and we're going through another good period of change now as people wake up to all this, and we're hopefully heading to better times ahead again.
Yeah, I definitely think we're heading to better times. Like, as you can see, these are all broken bells and things. But yeah, the cathedrals are a good one, because cathedrals were basically frequency machines for healing. That's why it was all to do with sound. That's why they had bells. That's why they had choirs. That's why they had organs, right? Organs, interesting word, good for your organs. Yeah. So people would go there and, get into the frequency, so I believe everything's frequency. And so frequency is really the creative spirit, right? So it was where you went to get close to the creator, and they've just twisted that into their God, right? That's outside of you.
Yes.
And that they've just changed the meaning, and now people go there and worship something outside of them. they give money, you know, for the privilege and get not much out of it when they used to all be there to heal us, right? And I think this is a big part of, because basically I think we've been invaded, to put it simply. And the first thing they needed to do was change the frequency, right? Because we were on this high frequency. We had all these frequency, instruments around, keeping the vibrations high, keeping people healthy of mind and body and spirit. And that had to be broken, right? For them to come in and put in their electronic frequencies and their different frequencies to control us. Like we've all heard of the 432
Yes.
to the 440, that got changed. 432 obviously equals 9. 9 is like I call it, the God number, because every like multiplication division of 9 always breaks down to 9. It always equals itself.
Yeah.
And they've turned it into 440, which is an 8, which is the infinity loop. So we
Yeah.
just go round and round and round and round and round and round. So
I know you're big on words as well, Campbell. So even the word cathedral, cathode, real cathode, something like that. And then, yeah, as you say, now we've got everything from 5G towers with these buzzing background to our phones, to our devices. And there's even stories in the past that when they first rolled out electricity, some people were getting sick, and maybe our bodies aren't used to these different powers and frequencies, and all this electronic. I think more and more people are realizing that this absolutely interferes with our energetic field in some way.
yeah. I call it the L grid, L electronic, the Elohim, right? The invaders, all this L stuff. That's the overlay. That's what they've put over the top of the natural grid, and that's how they control us, right? Like you said, they keep our frequency low. It makes us a bit more, confused and not as self-empowered, definitely sicker, right? They love to do that, that they're into the food and the water and the air, all this kind of stuff. It's all to make us sicker, but this old world was all to heal us, right, and keep us in good frequency. I mean, these things are interesting. This is called a monstrance, strange name again, but as you can see, it's almost like a mini part of a cathedral.
Yeah.
Right? They look very similar. And again, I think that these were like tools, like handheld healing devices of the old world, and they've just been taken over by the church. And now they basically say that they've all got these chambers in them, and what they do now is they put bits of dead people in them. The Catholic Church, like this, all there are saints. Like if you're looking at it, it's very weird. Like they have like someone's finger bone in there, or all these different body parts.
And all this type of stuff, like God knows what's in the Vatican archives and the Smithsonian Institute, like all this beautiful stuff that should be open to the public, to the people. Like what gives them the right to hide all that from us?
Yeah, totally right. But they're here for us. They're just here to save your soul. But all they do is hide stuff, sit on their golden thrones while half the world starves, and people still believe that they're of God, and that's not without even mentioning all the P-file stuff that
Yeah.
has come out. And every time it comes out, none of these people get charged. The church don't do anything about it, but they just, oh well, we'll just pretend to cover that up. But people still somehow believe that these people are spokesmen for God, right?
Yeah.
But everything in the old world was all frequency, right? And like you said before, this is what we're starting to learn again, is that frequency is the way to heal yourself. It's the way to heal the world. It's the way to, even with electroculture, you can grow crops much bigger just by putting copper of certain frequencies around them, right? And drawing in ether energy. But
Yeah,
this
and
one
we've
here,
heard
this
those
is,
studies about playing music to plants and all that
yeah,
type of thing as well. Yeah.
all that stuff, right? This is, can't see the year. Can I move that? Oh, there we go. 1790, right? How are they lighting this up?
So it's not widely accepted that electricity was invented to later on in the 1800s. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that was the reintroduction.
Yeah.
We have all these inventors, apparently, but my view on that is it's all old world tech that they've stolen, and they put it in their inventory. And when they've changed it so that they can control it and use it to control us. Then an inventor gets it from the inventory, right? And brings it back out. And we do get interesting depictions like this one, of underground train systems, tube train systems, right? All over the place back in the 1800s and before. And now what are we learning? That there's tunnels everywhere, right?
Yeah, and some people say that some of the most extensive tunnel networks in the world are like below Melbourne and in Australia.
Yeah. There's definitely lots in Australia. I mean, I remember when I was in Perth growing up, like it was pretty much common knowledge that there were tunnels under there. Everyone knew about them. The one in Fremantle was even marked out, and then suddenly it all disappeared, and then now it's all being exposed again. And
Yeah, well, I tell a story, Campbell, about when I went to uni in Hobart, and part of our initiation for like the fraternities and for college was the fourth years would take the first years through the tunnels that go from the uni like down out underneath the city, and you come out near the hospital and stuff. And they all had their black clothes on and flaming torches, and I was like, damn, this is pretty occult. And I'm sure it was just a watered down version of what used to happen back in the 60s or 70s, whenever. But yeah, I didn't know those tunnel networks exist and you could make your way through the city under them. And that was just still open to the public if you knew how to get into them.
yeah, and then I guess people started catching on, right? But that again, that they were all just old world infrastructure that was stolen and used, by the elites. I call them the elites, the elites, for their own nefarious, and that's all come out what that nefariousness is recently, right? That's how they're doing all their trafficking, shall we say?
Yeah.
But this is interesting about, armor. Armor is a big one. Like how were they building this armor, right? If you look into armor, some of the armor that they apparently were building in the Dark Ages, which I don't believe existed, like how, and jewelry, like all these rings, right? This is what we're starting to realize now, is that all this again was for energy and to raise your vibration and to keep you healed. We've got all these tensor equipment that's coming out now, which is basically copper, twisted. It's all cut at sacred cubits and things. And that's what jewelry was, right? The crowns with all the gemstones in them. They weren't for kings, they weren't just to do with money and opulence. They were actual devices that people would wear to raise their frequencies. I mean, sure. And we had things like this. Look at this. This is a lamppost, right? I mean, how and why were they doing this if it was just to create light? And you can see even at the top here, we've got one of these balls. You see these everywhere. It's got the spire on it. And there are pictures around where you see these balls and they've been broken and they seem to have mercury in them. And mercury is another interesting thing. Back in the 60s, the teachers would literally give the kids mercury to play with. They put it in their hands, right? And they'd play with it. And then, you fast forward to the 80s and now it's all just there to kill you, right?
Yeah.
So they just keep changing their story. When this is an interesting one, I think that's supposed to be Jesus, but it's just showing that there's a higher energy, right? And there's the ball underneath. So is that to do with drawing down higher frequencies? Because Christ means basically the anointed one, right? So it's all to do with, chrism, third eye. Christ died at 33 apparently, but we've got 33 vertebrae, right?
Yes.
And that's the Jacob's ladder. That's once you get to the top, you hit the temple, which is in your skull, and the third eye, right? And the chrism fluid is how you get anointed.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you have many photos from like World's Fairs that were in Australia, Campbell? That might be cool.
Yes.
We can maybe touch on. Because for people, again, that haven't heard about this, the World's Fairs were things that happened in all these major cities around the world, and the theory is that this was the reset or the repopulation. This is where we see the postcards of the Cabbage Patch Kids when we've done previous episodes on Tartaria. Was this just to tell people the new narrative of before movies and TV or internet or anything, you go around all the cities, hey, this is the story. Do they put all the people that were non-conformists or pushing back in the psych wards at the time, and then we've all of a sudden repopulated everywhere with kids for the next generation of indoctrination? These are the things that we just don't know, but the timeline itself Doesn't add up. But pretty incredible, these World Fairs buildings that, again, that they tell us just were for a fair, a temporary fair. They built them in a year or two, and some of these things are the most incredible buildings you've ever seen.
Yeah, yeah, and they were whole cities, right? So, I mean, this one is that I think that's the Ferris wheel. It might not be, but the first Ferris wheel ever built was at a World's Fair, and you can see these aren't the best photos. I'll get into some, but photos like this, like you said, all the stories say they were built in a year or two. Popped up, and that they were temporary. They were made of wood and stucco, basically, right? And built. They were built to be destroyed. And some people can buy that, but many of these buildings still exist. Like there's one in Melbourne, there's one in Brisbane, the one in Sydney burnt down, as that story that we hear all the time. And the one in Sydney apparently held all the papers, all the information of Australia up to that date. So they just got rid of it, right? Destroying the past. But the thing about these World's Fair is, not many people talk about the canals.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just the buildings. They had to build all these canals, and then you have the fountains, right? They're all electricity, right? They're all lit up. But the fountains are interesting because that's a plumbing system, a pressurized plumbing system. You can see that here's a fountain here, right? So there was all this plumbing system under these, and they never talk about. But like you mentioned earlier, there don't seem to be toilets in Tartaria. We have all these massive buildings, and there's basically no kitchens and no toilets, but they could definitely do plumbing because we see the fountains everywhere. But I mean, look at the size of this building, right? These are people down here.
Yeah.
Right. So look at this. I mean, they're so oversized. You can see the amount of antennas or spires on the roof here. Right, so it definitely looks like they were drawing down ether energy, and you can see the size of these. Look at this, all built in a year apparently, and again, look at the size of the people. Right, these are people. Right, compared to the size of that building, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and all built in a couple of years just to knock over. But the way I see it is, this is actually an intact old world city that they found. And this was just their way of getting rid of it, right? Because in the World's Fairs, they also introduced so much stuff, like all the foods, like things like oats and cereals and breakfast and all this was introduced in the World's Fairs. They had passports in the World's Fairs. They had human zoos in the World's Fair, where that was to teach that there's all these different types of people and primitive people and all this kind of stuff. It was just indoctrinating people into the new paradigm, and that's what they were for. Because all these cities and buildings, they say that they founded them. Right? That's an interesting word, right? Because all they did was found them. They just found
100%.
them.
Yeah, that's such an important point for people at home. Again, when their play on words like founded, they never say built, and there's never blueprints or
No, you can't find any of the blueprints or the architectural drawings or anything, but they just whacked them up. And I mean, there's a nice big tower in the back here. You see these everywhere too, right? Big metal towers, and they just say, oh, they're just for viewing, right? Like the Eiffel Tower. But I suspect that they were giant antennas.
Yeah.
I mean, because these were full, like you can see, built out cities. And the other interesting thing is, none of these World's Fairs ever made a profit. And they kept doing them over and over and over for like 50 years. I mean, they actually still do them today. But these old world ones, they were running up into the 1920s. But none of them ever made money, but they kept doing them. I mean, that doesn't make sense, does it?
Sounds a little bit like the media today, Campbell. They're all losing money and people aren't watching, but you want to get out that propaganda and messages, like the rich just pay for it.
Yeah. Exactly. This is a Ferris wheel. It's not the best photo. 1904. This was the biggest Ferris wheel ever built, and it was also the first Ferris wheel. These carriages, I can't really see. I'll see if I can get a better photo. The carriages could hold up to 100 people, And when they were finished with it, they took it apart and buried it.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? They didn't even melt it down to reuse it, but it just makes no sense. Why would you take it apart and bury it when you could just leave it up? It just makes no sense. But you can see the size and how clean. Look how clean these cities are, and how perfect. Like, there's no mistakes.
When
And
you're after World's Fairs, or I'm happy for you to keep going because these photos are amazing. But I'd love to talk about the blimps and the airships as well. If you've got some photos with that
yes,
stuff, yeah,
yeah, man, the airships. I mean, I just flick through like castles. We've actually got a lot of castles in Australia. Like, you go look at Parliament House in Sydney. It's literally a castle. That one there was a wine barrel,
wow,
like just massive, right? Looks like it's made for giants. So these things are everywhere. Introduction of cars, but the biggest building in any World's Fair under the roof was like 30 acres.
yeah,
One building, 30 acres, right? And we've all heard of the Freemasons. And I just kind of say that they call themselves that because they ran around getting Freemasonry,
yes.
right? Just stealing all the buildings.
I think the Crystal Palace was it London. I think that is one of the most incredible ones out of this whole sort of story. Yeah,
That is a very interesting one because I'll just find a picture of it before we get onto the airships. So this Crystal Palace, I mean, it's a very interesting story. Basically, they say that they built it in 1850. It was covered in glass, and the glass, if you look it up, was 5 mil thick. 5 mil, and it was curved, and they somehow could make this in the 1850s and then transport it, right? Transport. This is, I think this might be a drawing, but this just shows sort of the scale of it. But this is it. This is the Crystal Palace, and this is the original one, right? You can see it's all glass and iron. And what they did is they took it down and moved it. Is the story. They took it apart, they moved it and reassembled it. But when they reassembled it, it kind of looked slightly different. And then it burnt down,
mm.
and it's just glass and iron. But
Do you
it's
know what
somehow
year they
big.
said they moved it?
I believe it was the 1860s. I'm thinking 1864.
Okay,
I could
yeah,
be wrong.
yeah.
And it burnt down in the 19. Oh, I can't. I think it might have been even the 50s. But there's also photos of it burning down, which, you know what I mean.
Do
It's
you
like they were set up to watch it burn down, right?
do you think the narrative of a lot of the world wars were also used to cover up and destroy the old world?
Totally,
Yeah,
totally. You just have to look at Dresden in Germany, which is the main city. It was amazing, and they just destroyed it, but they did it all through Europe.
yeah,
This picture, you can see this is a big tree inside the building. So many people have sort of said, what were these? Because, there were lots of crystal palaces. They just kind of tell us there was one, and they do this all the time. Oh, it's just, a standalone building, but they were actually everywhere. But I think they were greenhouses,
hmm.
for growing food. And you can
Yeah.
see there's a massive tree in this one. So it's interesting, but that's that. There you go. That's the Crystal Palace, and it was massive. It was acres under the roof, and they just took it down and moved it. Right. So
Wild.
it's a crazy story.
Yeah. Yeah, airships. So for people that don't know, this is kind of like the mainstream narrative of the Hindenburg and the disaster is, again, you go down that rabbit hole and it's so much more to it than that. It was cheap, it was safe, they could move a lot of people, a lot of weight. It was a lot faster mode of transport than people maybe think, these balloons slowly floating. And once again, it's one of those things that you can't control unless, the Rockefellers and that want to control with plane tickets and petrol and paying and licenses, and people would have been free to move around the realm however they wanted, kind of thing. So that's why this is a fascinating rabbit hole, because again, we're just not taught at school how common these blimps were as a mode of transport and how they were pulling up to buildings and the ladder out and you'd go down, parking mid-air and stuff. It's just crazy when you start to see some of these photos. That was one of my favorite rabbit holes.
Mine too. Like I was doing live back then. I mean, gosh, I don't know, 4 years ago or something, and I'm literally discovering it all alive, and I was just freaking out when you see all the buildings, because we're sort of taught that they're just blimps, right? Like the Goodyear blimp.
Yeah.
This is a picture from inside an airship. They were literally floating hotels, and you can see all these windows. I think this is another reason why they had to get rid of them, is because they flew not that high, and you could see everything under you, right? You could see the realm, you could
Yeah.
see everything, and they didn't want us to. Let me. So here you go. So this is a photo. This is an airship, and as you can see, it's hooked up. I believe is this. Yeah, I think this is the Empire State Building. But you can see like the gangplank has come down the front. Got our little veranda here where they come out, and there's people walking into the airship, and it's tethered up here to the top. And you see this over and over again. That's a blimp airship. So these things were massive, and we're sort of taught that this is all there was, right? That it was just a big balloon, and you had this little compartment where you might be able to fit a few people in there. But that's not the case. This is what was inside them. Look at this double story. They got the dining room. So they were literally floating hotels. And
Do you think the
there's the
yeah, here you
Hindenburg.
go, the Hindenburg. So this is what I want to talk about. The fact that this was captured on camera and video when that wasn't that common at the time, and people might have heard the clip with the guy going, "Oh, this is a disaster, worst thing I've ever seen," and that was actually audio put in over the top of it later on by the news media at the time. So it all looks like a bit of a false flag psyop to scare people and end this technology.
100%. 100%. And then there's the whole thing that it was full of
Hydrogen, yeah,
hydrogen, but they actually were running them on helium, and so the Hindenburg didn't even have the right gas in it. But that was obviously done to blow it up. But yeah, the fact that in the 1930s they happen to have cameras and video cameras there to capture the whole thing, it just it just screams psyop, right? You
yeah. Another
see,
thing I think I read was these were still really common in Germany a lot later than the rest of the world, and that's when America and maybe the Illuminati or whoever's running the show, they stopped, I think, exporting helium, and that's when maybe Germany were forced to use helium instead. There was some controversy around the gas. Yeah,
that's the story. Yep, that's the story we're given.
yeah,
That's why it was full of helium. But I think it was just a psyop to get rid of these and to call
okay,
them dangerous, right? But I mean,
okay,
how many airplane crashes have we had?
yeah,
Like, they haven't banned airplanes, have they?
mm,
But
yeah,
here's another one you can see. They hooked them up to these towers, right? You walk up the stairs and you jump in your airship,
yeah.
right? And we see
Incredible.
those towers everywhere, right? There's another. This is how they used to house them, but I've got some better pictures I'll find. I've just got a lot of pics here, but yeah, airships. It was too free, right? It was way too free and uncontrollable. To the Allies, right?
Yeah, and this is why I love it, is because people. This is one of the things that frees your mind. Can you imagine if this was affordable and you had all your group of friends and you could float off and just explore and then end up camping where you wanted, and even international travel or whatever? Like, it was just such a free world back then compared to the matrix that they keep us in now.
Mm, yeah, totally. And here's a cross section. So like I said, we're sort of told that this was all a balloon, right? But down here you can see there's quarters. It's not the best picture, but they were literally like hotels in there. They had everything. Here's some more of these towers, and these towers, like I said, they're everywhere, right? And they just sort of tell us that they just for communications these days, or they were for viewing. But it doesn't make sense when you see the amount of these towers that are around, and airships, like, they were everywhere.
Yeah.
Here you can see one. They used to. I think this is the hospital. Yeah, hospital. This is a hospital on top of an airship, and they used to take people up there, and they were all windows so they could get good sunlight, because they were
Yes.
using sunlight to heal people.
Yeah.
Right. Here's a nice wide one. Right. So the story we've been given is far, far from the truth, right? We get shown things like this. Oh, it's just these weird balloons with one guy, standing underneath it.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the story they try and spin. But clearly, that's not what was going on. I've actually got a picture up here if I can find it. There you go. There's a Zeppelin with all its rooms in there. As you said, Germany, was sort of seemed to have. Germany seems to be one of the last sort of vestiges of the old world, and that's probably a big reason for World War II, right? Because they
Yep.
just went in and destroyed it all.
Yeah.
I think this even might be the Ford Motor Company where like factory in America, but these towers, right? You see them everywhere, and it's like, why? What possible function could they have? Well, maybe it was to tether airships to, right? Because that was the mode of transport, just like this one, right? Tethered to this tower, and
Is
so they had
there
different transport back then. They had airships, they had the trains, the trams.
Actually,
Um,
that's another good rabbit hole, Campbell. Tartaria or the old world trains, if you've got some photos, just again showing that what we're told doesn't add up with how sophisticated the trains and the train networks were, and that they might not have even run on coal. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they did run on coal. Here's just a close up of how they worked. It was so all this stuff is documented, right? The Empire State was definitely built to, have airships connect to it. But today they're like, oh no, 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 that definitely never happened. But we've got photos of airships tethered. I think this is the Chrysler building, but it was happening everywhere. So I'm just trying to find one. Oh, there you go. Is that Sydney? I don't know. Is that the hub? No, I don't think it is. There's an internal landing airfield on the top of an airship. I mean, it was just crazy what was going on. I'm just going to quickly, yeah, this one. So this, you can see this is tethered, this airship, and it says here mooring tower, right?
Yep.
Passenger entrance, all the decks and that, engines, and it goes down. And look at the building down here. It's like a castle,
Yeah.
right? And even here it says air station, right? So these were the airports of the old world. And there's even a picture of Ohio, is it, in America, where what are they called, that religion? And they've got this
Mormons.
big, the Mormons, yeah, and it's got this big dome with airport written on it. And here you go, building provides mooring mast for Zeps. So this is something that they try and hide, but like the photographic evidence is just,
Crazy.
beyond doubt, right?
Yeah.
No, it's the same one, but yeah, there's tons that's not real. That one, obviously, but it's an interesting thing because they're called airships, right? Ships of the air, and they kind of change that right into, oh no, ships are things that go on water, right? So they just love to play around with words because it's interesting that we have two words for ships, right? Is it a ship or is it a boat?
Yeah.
Most other things we only have one word for, right?
Yeah, the
So what do you say,
trains. Is there any
train?
other rabbit holes we haven't touched on with Tartaria in the old world? Do you think we should?
I mean, I think the big thing is that it was, I call it the macro network, right? So the cities were actually a network, right? And that they harvested energy. They had all the transportation, that all everything sorted out this in this macro grid, including the star forts, which were built on energy nodes, and they're basically cymatic patterns, right? Like mirroring the energy that they're on. They're like amplifiers. So
Yeah.
we get this macro grid, which has been changed to a microgrid, right? The electronic system. Let me just see trains. Sorry, I've got so many
No, you're
so
all right.
many folders and pictures here.
I'm
Um,
sure people at home are absolutely loving all this, so it's all good. But yeah, we've got through pretty much everything, and we'll be under an hour. So this is hopefully going to do really well with people.
all right, I'll show you this. This is something else that they find. underneath roads, when they dig them up, they find this. And these are, you can see they're almost like tiles, right? They're all individual pieces that have been laid, and it's metal, right? And there's whole streets of them. And so what was, you can see here, it was underneath the road, right? And they've uncovered it. So, what were these for? Was this some kind of magnetic levitation that they were using for transport? Or was it some kind of power source? Because when you look into, especially into trams, you get these crazy pictures. They basically say that they were horse-drawn, right? And you've just got to think about that. And can a horse really pull a tram? And what happens when they go uphill? What happens when they go downhill? Is that actual? Is that even in the realm of possibilities? Because they can't let us know that there was electricity back then that they were using. But these streets, they're everywhere. This might just be all of those. So that there's so many things. Every old world city had canals in it, all of them, but most of them have been covered in and turned into streets.
Yeah.
And they kind of tell us, oh, Venice is the canal. That's where the canals are. But go through Europe, man. I was in Netherlands last couple of months ago, and there's canals everywhere through Amsterdam, obviously all through the Netherlands. They're in every city. They're all through Prague. They're in like the Balkans, Croatia, everywhere.
Yeah.
But this is what they do. They just point at one place and say, oh, this is the exception. Like the Eiffel Tower, that's the exception. But when you look into it, they are everywhere. They're just everywhere. But what I can do is I can just have a quick look at my
take your
favorite.
time. I can always edit it, mate, if you want to find some good train ones, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, well, I was just going to show you quickly some star forts, because star forts are what blew my mind, especially when I started looking and I realized they were everywhere. And if no one's ever seen them before, this is a star fort. All right. And if you look into cymatics, this is basically a cymatic pattern. And these things, that's not the best picture, are everywhere. And you can see here, big star, right? And now it's got a city inside it, right? So these, in my opinion, there's another one. A lot of them are buried. They just sort of let them grow over. But you can see they've all got the same features. They've all got these are called bastions. So a lot of the time they'll call them bastion forts because it's the same thing. They now tell you that they're forts and that they were all for war. Like they flip it, right? When they used to be for harmony, right? And to create, and interesting, they call them batteries. A lot of them are called batteries.
Yeah.
All right. So that's kind of a bit of a giveaway. But these things, they're everywhere and they've all got the same features, but they're all different. These are the old, and when you look into the old maps, you'll find that all the old world cities, like all the old cities we still have, were walled cities with star forts attached. I call them star cities. This is Bonn, so that's in Germany, and this is Palmanova. So I've been here as well, and with this one, you can see how much is buried, right? You can see these sort of little bits popping out and how big it actually is. So I've been lucky enough. I've been to I don't know, 7 or 8 different star forts now, and they're massive, massive structures, and they're everywhere. But they never tell us about them.
Reminds me of snowflakes. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, well, yeah. So snowflakes, the mandalas that the Buddhists make. You've got cymatic patterns. That is basically a cymatic pattern is when you put a frequency through a medium. They often use like drum skins and things, and they put salt or something on top, and they'll play a frequency, and it will create this perfect geometric form. And so this is what I believe that these are, that they're just mimicking the natural frequency of what's underneath them.
Yeah.
And like I said, now they've all been turned into, well, we're told they're all for war. They're all for death and killing, like everything that they try and tell us, right? But they're actually all for energy, right? For healing, to enhance us. And this is what's happened, is they've taken over the old world and inverted everything. They've changed the frequency of
Absolutely, yeah.
these things. But
Satanic inversion that they love to do.
the great inversion. But yeah, and I'm watching. If you just put in Starford or Bastionford into Google, and you will find these things are everywhere. And Malta in the Mediterranean is literally one big star fort. This is a picture from a book. This is from the 1600s, this drawing. And look at that city. Look at the amount of towers going up, right, to collect the ether energy and the domes and everything. Yet the people in the foreground, he's just on a donkey with his basket.
Yeah.
You know, so we're supposed to believe that these people built this. Right, so the story is just crazy. It just doesn't add up. This map, this really sort of shows you that everything was connected and it was all a big macro grid, right? Like you know, a circuit board, but on a macro level.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're in the ocean. They're everywhere.
Cool.
So there you go.
Do you have any cool train station ones you want to show?
Train station or trains?
Or just trains? I think I saw in a recent episode of yours, maybe there was some cool ones. Yeah.
See, maybe I'll put them under trams.
Or trams in the cities. Yeah, all that stuff's cool.
Michelle Gibson does a lot of good work on the grid. And her theory is that, you know, they were for moving charge, I guess, basically around that floating trams. I can't find where I've put my trains. Hang on, so I'm going to do a search. But it was basically everything was connected, and it was all for a reason. It was all for transport, but it was all energy based, but not energy as far as electricity, right? These closed grids that we've been taught it's all about. It was basically all ether energy, and then of course, well, we've got the orphan trains. That's a whole nother.
Yeah, we went down that rabbit hole with Guy Anderson and with Heidi Love as well. With the pickled punks, I hadn't heard about them either. Yeah.
The which ones? The pickled
punks. I think Heidi was when a lot of the elites and the royals were collecting those babies in jars, and it was like whoever had the biggest collection of these deformed, like babies and fetuses, seemed to be like, you know, it was like one of the things that the rich wanted to get and brag about. I've got 10,000 pickled punks. Like, it's just another weird, creepy thing that they would seem to be into back in those days of repopulation.
Wow. There's a photo of Leonardo DiCaprio with one.
Yes.
When he's young. Yeah. And that, I guess, goes, you could link that to the homunculi as well, that they were trying to create these beings that were in jars. So there's a lot of weird stuff. And this is why I think we've been invaded, is because, you know, you can have all your arguments. Oh, no, they just want power. They just want money. But when you come down to it, they're not us. They're not us. Like, we've never met anyone who wants to put a fetus in a jar. Like, we've never met anyone who wants to start a war. We've never met anyone who wants to go to their neighbors and say, unless you give me so much money of your wage every week, I'm going to come and lock you up. Like, it's not human. Yeah. It's just not. They're not human traits. So just their actions give them away, right? They are not us.
Maybe this is a good place to wrap up about who do you think, because I know with my research we've touched on the royal bloodlines and you know, the Rothschilds and these people, the royals. They openly brag about, well, they're connected to so on down the lineages through to Egypt days and even older again. I think Queen Elizabeth was a descendant of Muhammad. So it's kind of like all these royal classes all over the world are all related from these royal bloodlines. And then it gets back to some of the biblical and ancient texts about, well, what happened? Anunnaki, Elohim, tweaking our genetics. It seems to be more and more dots being connected that something clearly happened. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll tell you that their heritage, their line goes back to the gods, right? There's a reason that they're all inbred, that they interbreed, right? Because it's a bloodline that they want to keep pure, or is it because they can't breed with anyone else because they're genetically different? You know, we've got this weird thing about blood types where, you know, most people are positives, right? O positive, AB, all this kind of stuff, but then we've got this Rh negative, which, conventional science and evolution would say that basically everyone comes from a common ancestor, the rhesus monkey, but there's this group of people that don't. Like, how's that? But no one, like, that's massive. But no one, definitely no scientists ever say, well, let's look into this. But basically, I think
Well,
that,
just on that quickly, Campbell, when we were in pharmacy school, that is something that they do just brush over. It's like, oh, sometimes if the baby and the mother are different and they're incompatible, and when in nature would that happen? Like, would the mother's body kill the baby? Like, it's something about it doesn't seem natural at all.
especially when they're trying to teach evolution, everything has, evolved over billions of years, to make that creature basically be able to reproduce itself, right? That's basically the story. So yeah, why would it ever happen that you get a
That
creature that
that
the
trait
mother,
would naturally die off if it was such a
yeah,
brutal thing.
it would
So
kill
yeah,
it would kill it off. Um, but yeah, I think that these beings, whatever they are basically, I think they've been, genetically messed with, from gods, whatever that is, from beings that aren't from here, or whatever. I think they're all possessed. So it's possession, right? And you can look into the work of, what's his name, Marzinski. What's his first name? I
we've
can't
had some
remember.
MK Ultra and Illuminati family survivors on the channel, and they talk about the rituals and all this stuff and kind of how it works. And yeah, it gets pretty crazy and pretty dark pretty quick that these people are into some weird stuff.
Yeah, they are, because they're worshipping dark entities, right? If you look into the Old Testament, and all three major religions are Abrahamic, right? They all have the same start person. But you get this, Yahweh, being who calls himself the Lord. It tells you in the Old Testament that he's a jealous God, which straight away it tells you he ain't the creator. Like, the creator's not jealous of anything. But the first thing he does basically is go through the Middle East and destroy cities with his ark, burn them to the ground, smite them, kill all men, women, children, and animals. And this is what we see today, right? The same thing. He demands sacrifice and worship. The first sacrifices come from, this bloodline. Baal, which you can take back to the Phoenicians, who became the Canaanites. The Canaanites worshipped Baal, right? So the Canaan Baal, right? It's kind of a little bit like that other word, right? Cannibal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and you can sort of trace this bloodline through history, and they're still in the ones who are in control today. Now, how far that goes back, I think there's definitely been tamperings with the dates and the timelines, which we can see through all the calendar changes and all this weirdness that goes on. But basically, they're the ones who introduced the control system, things like consumerism, right? Where you go out and you buy possessions, right? Because they're all about possession, because they're possessed.
Yes.
All this job stuff, all this, everything that was all introduced by the Phoenicians, basically, the sea people, and they don't even know where the sea people came from. They just turned up one day, right? So,
And
it's
debt-based
interesting.
debt-based money as well, like usury and how far that goes back to Babylon. I think that's so important. That's kind of what we started the channel on, is explaining the evils of the banking system. Because if everyone's trading and everyone has enough, like, no one sits around and goes, "Oh, I need to keep accumulating more and more." It's only when you have debt-based money you can keep accumulating, borrowing from the future, thinking short-term rather than long-term, all those things, and then it plays on our emotions.
Yeah,
Yeah, greed. Yeah.
manipulate the market, and you get people, to the belief where they need the system, because, especially now, no one hardly knows how to grow their own food anymore, or make their own shoes or clothes or houses. And even if you did, you're not allowed to, right? Go and
No.
try and build a house, your own house in America, or any sort of Western country, and no, man, the government will be there telling you can't do that. So that's how also they're dumbing us down, but it's making us reliant on the system. So even today, when people want to, they want to move out onto the land and all this kind of stuff, they've still got, they're so addicted to the system that they're scared. How will I survive without money? And of course, money, right, is the mon I. Mon is one eye, the one eye. It's the one eye symbolism, right? And you see it
Yes.
everywhere, right? The whole Black Eye Club and all that kind of stuff that we see. And the Black Eye Club, if you may have heard of the Vril,
Yeah. Yeah.
they put in the eye, whatever. There's possession. So I really think that they're all possessed, but this is why they need to keep their bloodlines, pure, or at least, apart from us, because that's how they're being controlled.
Yeah, and that ties into the whole sort of New World Order agenda being based anti-human and anti-nature and just destructive versus we are the ones that are creative and we are the ones that can solve this kind of problem. As
Mm,
you say, if you want to go fishing, oh, you need to pay the government a license. If you want to plant food, oh, you're not allowed to do that because you live in, like, there's all these rules where you're just not allowed to do anything in nature, and it's getting worse
mm.
with the stuff that they're trying to bring in and push now. But that probably ties into the last thing to talk about is that this anti-natural world they're trying to push us all in, where it's all, put on your goggles, chip in your head, glued to the screens, live in a 15-minute smart city in a small concrete box under artificial lights. And this, I think, is a massive reason why so many people are getting sick. Dr. Jack Kruse
Mm.
touches on this, but it's
Yep,
just not
yep.
being out in the harmony of nature, and the lights and the frequencies and everything is synthetic and unnatural, and it's not. So what do you think about how they're pushing all this stuff on us, and what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, definitely, I don't think they're creative at all. I don't think they have creativity because they don't have the spark of life in them. And so, all this stuff, all the media, all the education, all that stuff is to get us to believe what they want us to believe, and then we create it for them. So that's the big scam. And yeah, AI screen time. I call it the 2D world. Right, that's where we are at the moment, coming through your screen. And the 3D world's outside. Like everyone sort of talks about 5D and we're going to the 5D world. I think we need to get back to the 3D world.
Yeah,
I think we need to get back to nature. And as far as, simulation and all this, it's all a simulation. I think they're bringing in the simulation. I don't think we're living in a simulation because we've got nature. We can go out in nature. We can get empowered. We can ground. We can sun gaze. How does that work in a simulation, right? Clearly, nature is our energy source, and they're bringing in the simulation, which again is what they love to do, right? They love to flip everything upside down. And this is what the internet is, social media scrolling, AI, and you don't have to look far to see the damage that that's doing, right? And it's completely dumbing people down. But again, they put it out there as, well, this is something you have to do. Digital ID is coming, you have to comply.
yeah,
But that's just trying to implant things into our subconscious so that repetition, if they do it enough, they believe that we'll think there's no option, right? But there's clearly a bit of, we always have choice, and it is a consent-based system, which is where they undo themselves because they can't get out of their script,
yeah,
and they've written all these laws, but there's always ways to get around them, right? So it really is, it's decision time. And going forward, like you said, we're going to see people who choose the 15-minute city, the L grid, and they're going to just get sicker and sicker and get more, transhuman. And that's what all these brain chips and stuff is. And again, right, we're doing it to help the paraplegics walk again. So they always tell us it's for our benefit. And 100% of the time, it turns into a control mechanism.
yeah,
So I think we've been fooled enough that we can now see it. And, I can't tell anyone what to do or, tell them what to choose. But I would, implore people to choose nature, to choose getting out there, to choose talking to people in real time, having conversations, growing your own food, getting in the sunlight, because we have all of this out there, and everything they offer us is the simulation. It's the copy,
yeah,
right? Instead of sunlight, just sit in front of a blue light, computer all day. Instead of telepathy, well, just Zoom people, right?
yeah,
FaceTime them, like, so that they've sort of given everything that we have innately, they've copied, and they're giving us this synthetic version and saying, oh, but look, it's easy. All you
yeah,
have to do is pay by the month, right? Because you'll own nothing, but you'll be happy.
yeah. Yeah, I think we've de-evolved from a lot of those extrasensory perceptions that we had, and a lot of the Aboriginal people still have a lot of these abilities and stuff,
Mm,
and certain individuals as well. But that's been
totally.
amazing, mate. I hope people at home have loved that rundown. I'll put the links to follow Campbell's work down below, and we'll have to catch up again in future, mate. But yeah, keep
Yeah,
up the
man.
awesome work. And any final thoughts for people at home?
Well, I would just say that you have choice, and it's definitely time to think about it. I know we're overloaded with information, but not many people are turning that into wisdom. So, probably get off the screen, stop the scrolling as much, and get out in the world, have real conversations, meet your neighbors, gather and start walking into the world that everyone says they want.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, guys, I hope you like that one. Smash the like button, share the videos around, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll talk to you again soon. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, Chris. Enjoyed it. Thanks, mate.